Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another video. Today I have the Brutus Monroe Inspiration Box for June 2020. This is 5 cards, 1 kit using the Magical Mermaids. This kit is actually sold out, but most of the products are available separately, so I will have those linked down below. So here's what the stamp set looks like inside this kit, and it's so cute. And I went ahead, because it would be a really long video for coloring all these, I stamped out all the images twice, and I colored them all using my Arteza Everblend markers. And so this is what I'm left with. I do this while I'm watching television and I fussy cut them out, and it's no big deal to me. So that's what I have to work with. We're going to start with card number 1 and using that incredible die that came in the kit, along with some of the mermaid skin that came in the kit as well. And this paper, if you haven't seen it yet, it's just gorgeous. I haven't seen anything like it. It just kind of shines and it is so pretty. So I cut it out of that, and I'm also cutting it out of an A2 piece of some of the green cardstock that came in the kit because I want to do an inlay. So I was very strategic as to where I put the die cut, and I will save the die cut itself for another project. But this is what I have. And so before I go ahead and put that in the center, I am planning to make a shaker. So I'm going to cover the entire back with some this is some 1/8 inch score tape. You could use liquid glue, but I wanted to make sure it didn't seep through, and I wanted everything to be nice and dry. So that's why I chose to use the 1/8 inch score tape. And I just put it all around the back. You can't see it really on the screen, but I do have a piece of acetate that I've cut down to fit that whole A2 size front, which basically measures 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So I'll just stick that down over the top. If I do have anything that hangs over the sides, I can trim that down. But there we have that. And so now we'll take our die cut and we'll just inlay that. I will use liquid glue for this, mostly because there's some small intricate parts. So I'll just take my liquid glue and put it all around the outside, and then I'll just put little dots of it in places that I think will potentially stick up. But once this dries, it's not going anywhere. So that's basically how I'll put that in there. But I love the inlay look. It looks so cool. And this die has so much potential, so I love it. Yeah, so we'll just stick that down, kind of let that dry, and then we're going to turn this into a shaker. All right, for my shaker, I have some Scotch foam tape that I have doubled up. You could very easily, not double it up if you don't want to, but I wanted to make sure my pieces had plenty of room to shake around. So I've cut that down. I even cut it a little bit, in half, I guess maybe a third of it, so that it would fit around the die cut. And I'm just trimming and making sure that everything is nice and snug up to each other, because at this point I wasn't sure what else I wanted to add to the inside. I knew I wanted to add some of the sequins. I also wanted to add some of the little shell bits that came in the kit. And then I also have some of this, I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's like an iridescent shaker filler, but that came in a previous kit. So I went ahead and put some of that in there, and then I'm going to grab out some of the sequins. I'll put those into one of my little trays, and I'm not going to add all the colors. I just want the silver and the gold, so I'm just picking the silver and gold out. You could put the blue in there, and here is where, I screwed up. I should have peeled off all of my release paper first before I added my shaker bits, because if you don't, sometimes that paper will catch, and then it'll shake everything, and you've got pieces coming out or sticking to the tape itself. So learn from me, folks. Make sure that you take that off before you put your shaker bits inside. I have another piece of acetate. I've showed this before. I like to put that down on the back, so that way it's just a little easier to put your piece right on top of your card base. And I did still have some sticky all around that, so I'm just sticking that down to a piece of Not Your Mama's heavyweight cardstock. For my sentiment, I'm going to ink that up with some Raven Detail ink, and then I'll stamp that down onto my scrap of cardstock. I don't think I mentioned, but I colored all those images using the alcohol ink cardstock that Brutus Monroe now carries. It's a really great cardstock. So I used that, and it worked beautifully, blended wonderfully. And then we're going to go ahead and stick everything down with our liquid glue, mostly because we don't need any more dimension on this card, unless it's a card that you plan to like maybe hand carry. Otherwise, this has plenty of dimension already. So we've got that, and then we're going to stick down a few more sequins, just some gold ones. And then you could use a jewel picker. I don't know why I wasn't using mine. So I'll stick that down, and then I've got a couple more down here. And if I had been thinking, which I never seem to be, I would have stamped my inside first, but we're going to go ahead and do that anyway. I'm going to pull out the little mermaid that I used on the front. We'll ink that up with some, this one is Overzealous. Some Overzealous Simon Hurley ink, and that is going to finish off our first card. So there's our first card. It's a shaker, and I love shakers. For card number 2, I decided to pull in the Stencil of the Month, which doesn't come in the kit, but it matches so perfectly that I just could not use it, right? So I'm going to tape that down with a little bit of purple tape I've got a piece of cardstock that I have trimmed down to about 4 inches by 5.5 inches. So it's a little smaller on the left and right hand side than an A2 size. And I've got some Minty Fresh Simon Hurley Create ink that I am just going to ink blend on that background. This is just supposed to be kind of subtle in the background. And you do need to be a little bit careful with this stencil just because as you can see, there's some little swirls in there, and if you swirl a little too heavy, you're going to bend those. But this would work so beautifully with some sand paste or some chroma glaze or anything like that. So I'm just putting a very subtle background back there. And then we are going to take the stencil that came in the kit with it, which is this cute little turtle, and I'm going to hold that down with a little bit of purple tape as well, and we're going to do the same thing on the turtle. Now I'm not really concerned about his shell. I just want his little hands and feet and his head and his tail to be covered with that ink, because we're going to pull in the Lilac Shimmer Sand Paste, which came in the kit. And that is something you can definitely get separate, so I'll have that linked down below. And they also have several other colors, so I would be interested to know how those look. Alright, I am covering up his little hands and head and tail and all that because I want to mask those off so that I can put some sand paste down for his shell. So we'll tape everything down. I'm going to tape this to my glass mat, and then we're going to put a little piece up on the top of the stencil like it's a hinge. But we're also going to put a little bit of that sand paste on the card panel that we just ink blended. So I will grab out a palette knife, and then we're just going to spread that on kind of like butter. I don't need it to be perfect. I just want it to go kind of diagonally from one edge to the other. And clearly it's not going to be perfect, but like I said, I don't want it to be perfect. So that's how it's going to look for now. And then we're going to also spread this on our little turtle shell. And then once I've got that all spread, I'll clean up my mess, taking my stencil, and washing that off. You wouldn't want this to sit on your stencil for too long because it would definitely dry on there and kind of be like cement. But that's how it looks. It's very cool. Before the sand paste on my panel dries, I decide to pull in some of those little shell bits and stick those down. Where it's a little bit thicker, the shell bits stick beautifully. Where it's not quite as thick, it doesn't. So I will come in a little bit later with my jewel picker and some liquid glue, but I'm just kind of outlining where I have the sand paste, which is fun. It's just a fun little element, and these don't add a lot of bulk. I know you might think that they would, but they really don't, and I'll show you that at the end. So where it's not coming up very easily, I will leave those alone, but where they are, I'll use some liquid glue to hold those down. And then I'm going to leave those off to the side to dry. And this is what they look like dry. It definitely dries a little bit darker, but it's so pretty and gritty and just cool. I'm going to fussy cut out my little turtle. I thought about leaving him on his panel, but I wanted as much of that background to show as possible, so I've just fussy cut him out, which was easy. My sentiment is going to be let's celebrate because, turtle, right? But I don't want it to be stamped the way the stamp is, if that makes sense. So I'm just inking up celebrate. You could cut your stamp apart, but just saying that even hurts my heart to say. I'm not one of those who can cut my stamps. I just cannot. So I'll clean off really good, and then I'll ink up the let's, and then we'll just set that right on top there. So we've got let's celebrate. And then we'll get ready to start adhering all of our pieces. I do have some of the purple cardstock that came in the kit cut down to be the full size of an A2 size card. So that's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. We're just going to have a little bit of purple peeking through on that right hand side. And then for our card base, it's some of your Not Your Mama's Heavyweight cardstock. I'm going to stencil in our little turtle on the inside left hand side. It's just a fun way to add something to the inside of your card so it's not just blank white. And I could have done it on both sides. That'd be kind of cool. You have one facing up, maybe one facing down, but I just did it on the left-hand side. and then I'll glue down my panel to my card base. And then I'll start attaching my turtle, which I'm going to use some Brutus Monroe foam tape on the back of him because I wanted a little bit of extra dimension, even though the shells do give a lot. But like I said, I'll show you, those don't add that much dimension. All right, and then I can't quite figure out how I want to put him down, just kind of testing it out, and then I end up going right back to my original, and then that's going to finish off our second card. I think that lilac sand paste is so pretty. And there you go. So let's take a look at it, how thick it is. It's really not that thick. But again, that's card number 2. For card number 3, we're going to do some ink blending over one of the foilables. Someone had asked the other day if you can actually ink blend over them, and you can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some tumbled glass and the Ergonomic brush from Pink and Main that Brutus Monroe sells in the store, and I'm telling you, it's awesome. I want to get it for like all my colors. So I'm going to blend that in the center, and you can use pretty much any ink that you have. These are Distress Oxide inks, so they are a little bit chalky, and they do leave a little bit of, I mean, it's a little bit different than your regular dye inks, but these work fine, so I'm assuming your dye inks would work beautifully as well. That next color was, honestly, I don't remember, so we're going to do that one, and then we're going to do Mermaid Lagoon around all those edges just to add a little bit deeper color. And I'm using the same brush, so I started with lightest to darkest. You notice I didn't clean it off in between, but that's okay. And you notice that the fish are a little bit cloudy now. I'm going to fix that. So I've cleaned up my mess, and I'm going to just rub the fish to kind of get some of that color off of there. I don't know if that would affect the foiling, but that's what I'm going to do. I have pulled out some copper Deco foil. This stuff is awesome. And I'm going to cut that down just to fit perfectly over the top of those fish. And then I'm going to pull in some copy paper that I'm going to fold in half. This will be my shim. And then I'll grab my laminator. Now my laminator is a very inexpensive laminator. It's the Amazon Basics laminator, so it was like $20. And I'm going to run this through my laminator about 3 or 4 times. If you've never done foiling before on any of these, they work best on the thicker images, if that makes any sense. So the very detailed ones, I can't seem to get them to work as well. It could be my laminator, it could be the tools that I'm using, I'm not 100% sure, but I have found that I have the best results when I do it with thicker images. And so I'm just, like I said, I'm going to turn this and flip it around and run it through about 3 or 4 times. And then I can open it up and I can definitely see that that foil has attached itself to the fish. So I'll pull that away very carefully. It isn't perfect, but that's kind of the neat thing about it, is that it isn't perfect. So yeah, and if you don't pull it away unless you're ready to actually reveal it, because once you try to do that, you cannot run it through your laminator again. Ask me how I know. I'm going to put this inside of my Misty, and I'm going to ink it up with some Raven Detail ink, my sentiment, so we're Mermaid for each other. I'm going to ink it up twice because this is Distress Oxide, so I want to make sure that that's a nice dark black. And then I'm going to grab out some of the ribbon that came in the kit, and I'll trim that down. And then the trick I usually use for putting down my ribbon is I'll use some score tape. This is some 1/4 inch score tape, and I'll cut it a little bit longer than the actual piece, and I'll wrap that around the edges. And then this way I can take my ribbon and I can attach that right down over the top of that. And yeah, I'm using this on my glass mat, so I'm not that worried about it sticking, and then I'll just fold my ribbon over the edges. I'm going to attach down one of the sand castles. I think that's so pretty. And then I'm going to put some foam tape on the back of this little mermaid, and I'll attach that right up to over that circle where the fish are swimming around. And then I'll flip this over and I'll trim off the excess from the sandcastle, and I'll attach this to some of your Not Your Mama's heavyweight cardstock. So obviously this is going to be my base for pretty much all my cards. I'll just use some liquid glue to adhere that down. And then for the inside, I'm going to take a couple of the little fish. So I'll take one of the whales and the little puffer fish, and I'm going to attach those to the inside. And if you notice that there's stuff on the back of my images, it's because I tried to stamp and then stamp it again using my Misty, and I wasn't lined up perfectly. So that's why there's like ink on the back of those, but it doesn't affect the actual stamping or coloring. So there's card number 3. For card number 4, I decided to pull in the die cut of the month, which is a cover plate, and this one's called Flower Burst, and it's absolutely beautiful. I used it on a couple of the pieces of the cardstock that came in the kit, which is a little bit lighter weight cardstock, so I didn't need a metal shim for these. They ran through my Gemini die cutting machine just beautifully, but if you have a thicker cardstock, you definitely want to use a metal shim. So I ran it through just to save you the boredom, and this is what I had, which isn't that beautiful? So I pulled in some more of that Lilac cardstock. I'm going to stamp Let's Celebrate on there, and then I'm going to trim that down with my guillotine trimmer, and then we'll get ready to start adhering things. So the biggest labor-intensive part of this card was actually the die cutting, and I saved you that because, I mean, there's really no reason to show you that. And then, so we'll go ahead and take our cover plate die cut, and then we're going to just adhere this down to some of the gray cardstock that came in the kit. I trimmed that down to be the size of an A2 size card, and I'm just putting glue strategically on the back in places where I think it might stick up. You clearly don't have to do the entire thing, that's fine, but yeah, just in spots where you know it potentially could stick up. Otherwise, that's a lot of coverage. And then I'll just stick that down to the front of that gray cardstock. I notice that there is a little bit of gray showing through on a couple of those sides. So I'm going to pull in my guillotine trimmer and trim that excess off. I didn't obviously cut that perfectly, so we're going to trim that down just a little bit. And the guillotine trimmer makes that really easy. And then when we're ready with that, we'll put some foam tape on the back of our Little Mermaid, and then we'll adhere down our sentiment to the front of our card panel. And Miles is very interested in what I'm doing. Usually he is like pawing up everything, so it isn't long before he's going to start trying to grab things. I think he just woke up from a nap, which is why he's a little bit lethargic. Otherwise, he's all like, "What you doing, Mom? What you doing? What's this? What's that? Can I have it?" And as you can tell here, he's starting to get that way. And then he's going to get bored and he's going to jump down because I obviously didn't let him have the paper. So all right, once my mermaid's adhered, we're going to grab a few of the silver sequins out, and then we'll adhere those down with our jewel picker and some liquid glue. 2 up top, 3 down at the bottom. And then we'll attach this to our card base, which is some more of that Not Your Mama's heavyweight cardstock. And I didn't do anything on the inside, so this is going to finish off this card. I just think this one turned out really pretty. It's amazing how that cover plate can just, I mean, it just pops. You don't have to do much after that. Love it. For our 5th and final card, we're going to bring in some Circle Foundation dies, and I'm just kind of placing them over my white card panel just to see what kind of dies I want there. I'm going to use that mermaid skin, which is absolutely gorgeous. I'm telling you right now, if you don't have it, you're going to want to buy it. I mean, I know that it's just so pretty. It's so, so pretty. And I don't even think the camera does it total justice, but I will show you in the end the best that I can. I've run those through my die cutting machine, and now I'm going to start attaching those to my card panel. And this is just a white cardstock panel that I have. I'm just using liquid glue to adhere things down. If you really wanted to add some interest, you could do foam tape or something like that. That'd be fun. And then once I have all those little pieces down, I am going to trim off the excess. I like to have some of my pieces going off the edge because it just gives the illusion that there's more going on outside of the card. So we'll trim off those excess pieces using my guillotine trimmer. It's just the easiest way for me to try and trim those straight because I know myself and I know that I can't necessarily cut straight all the time. So once those are cut, we'll start attaching our pieces. But before I do that, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. So it's just some Raven Detail ink. I'm stamping that on some white cardstock, and then I'm going to trim that down with my guillotine trimmer. And then I'm even going to add a little angle to the one edge. And then I'll use some liquid glue to adhere that down. I'm leaving all that excess white on the side just because that'll help me to line it up on my glass mat, make sure that it's straight. But again, you could use some foam tape to pop this up. I really don't want to cover up that mermaid paper too much. It's way too pretty for that. So I'll trim off my excess here. We're going to use liquid glue to adhere down our mermaid as well. And then we're going to use some of the blue and the turquoise sequins that came in the kit, and we're going to be pretty generous with those. Those match that mermaid skin really well, and so it just adds this little extra twinkle to it as if it needed it. And then I'll attach those down with some liquid glue. And I know the white's showing through, but when that dries, it'll be clear. But take a look at that mermaid skin. If that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what would. I love it. All right, and that's going to finish off card number 5. So my camera did a little funky something or other, and so I can't like show you individually each one, but I do have a screenshot of all the different cards. If you had a favorite, I would love to know which one was your favorite. Just leave that down in the description or the comment section down below. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thank you so much for all the kind words that you guys leave. Using my affiliate links, that really helps me out a lot. That keeps this channel going. And even sharing my video, whatever, you guys are just amazing. So thank you very much for all you guys do, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.